Let's go.
Welcome to the Soul Fam podcast, where we expand your personal universe. I'm Diana Marquetta, and in each episode, Soul Fam co-founder, co-creator Lexi Strummer-Solden and I interview the world's most rising and longtime experts in consciousness, spirituality, entertainment, healing, and science. From Earth's dimensions and dimensions way, way beyond. On the Soul Fam podcast, our frequencies are high and your heart chakras will open as these powerful voices of today share cutting-edge research, profound experiences, and valuable knowledge for your world in this out-of-this-world, thought-provoking, envelope-pushing interviews that could only take place right here on the Soul Fam podcast. Welcome to the Soul Fam podcast. I am super excited to have Ria Loveguard with us today. She is a starseed and light language activator. She goes by @SuperstarSeed on Instagram and has been working with individuals for a long time, with groups too. Is that correct? And is really conveying a lot of deep wisdom, knowledge, and sharing some of her own experiences with us today, and does on a regular basis in her posts. So how are you today, Ria? Super, super excited to talk with you.
Very well. Thank you so much for the invitation. Always a pleasure talking starseeds, light language, and all the cosmic stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've noticed recently, just in your posts, that it felt like there's such an importance to talk about this particular subject matter right now, and why activations are important, and why recognizing both our sort of what I feel like is our present starseed and perhaps even our past galactic starseed selves is important at this time for our own human development. Am I wrong?
I think it definitely is coming to a bit of a culmination where I believe the whole cosmic wisdom is entering mainstream. I've seen now that of course, there is not always a positive reaction, but I think we are becoming noticed and recognized. We, as awakened souls, are becoming a force to be reckoned with. I heard it referred to, I think, back in 2020 as a popcorn effect, where human consciousness is like popcorn. Basically, they don't always pop in the same place at the same time, but it's just like pop, 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 pop. And all of a sudden you have a whole bowl of popcorn, or like a critical mass of awakened human beings. And I think this is what's happening, what has been happening over the last few years, and it's only accelerating.
It feels that way. Did you notice a lot of changes in 2020? And I know you've been recognizing your own self as a starseed, and you've been doing this for your own personal well-being for a while. Did you really feel that sort of energetic increase and then see it also in your clients?
Well, yes, that's when I have properly awakened. So I had my light language activated over 15 years ago.
Right.
But I wasn't aware what it was. I wasn't aware. I couldn't connect the dots. And in late 2019 was when my soul family, the Arcturians, started making contact. And 2020 was a proper, let's say, awakening and realization where all my memories came back. And it's happening, obviously, sometimes in waves. I think this year, 2024, is a huge year. People are awakening. I think the eclipse that took place in April was a big kind of threshold where a lot of things accelerate, a lot of things somehow solidified for the collective. I felt like a huge energetic shift. And in fact, it's happening all the time. But to be fair, sometimes it doesn't always have to be some global or cosmic or collective energy. Yes, those energies stimulate outcomes. For example, when first time that the Arcturians got in touch with me, I felt that they were conveying this sense of urgency, like, finally, it's about time you actually recognize who you are, what you came here for. But sometimes it doesn't always start with some global event or, I don't know, solar flare eclipse, whatever, solstice. It sometimes is personal journey of pain, trauma, shock waves that are like a wake-up call. That's also happened to me at the same time, because in 2020 I lost business that I built and my whole identity, and it was like a big kind of wake-up call, like, what are you doing? But very often there is some personal heartbreak or accident or some diagnosis that actually shake us to actually perceive what matters.
So can you tell me a little bit more about that personal breakthrough, especially with light language? 15 years ago, I just learned about light language maybe 5 years ago. And when I see people shift into that activation, it's almost like you go into another way of being, fully embody that sort of light language. And I have not done it, but I would assume it might be a little frightening.
Very often is. Many people have their light language activated spontaneously and then they try to look for answers. For
Right.
me, it was very much a conscious and desired process. It started in Christian environment when I remember being 17 years old, pursuing spirituality in the only way that I knew at the time, which was the Christian religion. I'm from Eastern Europe. That's the kind of cultural background I'm from. Perhaps if I was from a different part of the world, I would be seeking answers in other ways. I don't know, meditation or something else. But I was seeking spiritual answers within the framework that my culture provided me with. So I remember being 17 and reading the Bible, reading the New Testament about all the amazing things that Jesus' disciples were doing, healing and speaking in tongues and kind of like prophesying. And I'm like, I'm sure this is true. I'm sure this is kind of like I had this overwhelming feeling that these kind of supernatural things are actually real. And I have always been a big fan of any sort of fantasy books, mythology. And again, I had always, since I remember, I thought all these things that these fantasy stories talk about, like telepathy, I don't know, mind-to-mind communication, elemental power. I believe we have these abilities as humans. We just don't know how to tap into them. So back in the day, I really wanted this. I just like literally, little did I know, I set this intention. I want it. I know there's something more, and I did find answers on a Christian retreat somewhere in the woods in Poland back 15 years ago. And I wanted to have my light language activated, and did activate. Of course, back then I thought this is just something confined to this one religious context. But later on, I discovered that even though I departed from mainstream faith and church, light language didn't die. It only stayed, and it was always there. It was always providing me with comfort. It was always providing me with calmness. Whenever I was stressed or afraid, it was always there for me. And then it all started making sense when Arcturians got in touch, because this is when I understood that there's more than one light language there, and where they come from various galactic frequencies, sometimes forgotten ancient civilizations. And as soon as the Arcturians provided me with the, let's say, mission brief, this is what you're doing. The minute I announced I'm going to hold my very first free class about light language, 3 more light languages activated. And
my
then another.
goodness.
And then people around me, participants, were being activated. And I was like, there's something about it. And then, there's been another 10 light languages. But I always find that when we step up, when we answer the call, this is when where things accelerate, even though we are not always feeling like we're ready. I basically, we think that we need to get ready and prepared, and then we do something. I find it's the other way around. When we step up and do what we decide to do, everything else follows. So that's a bit of my story.
I think that's really interesting. So, I mean, you're 17 years old, you're on a retreat. Did you think you were speaking tongues at the time?
Yeah, of course, that was the only explanation. But I wasn't buying this explanation, because
Right.
one thing I wasn't buying is that there is no understanding of it, that it's just praying. I was just like, no, there's definitely something more to it. I wanted to understand. I wanted to ask questions. I'm quite a curious person, and the answers came, but they came like 10 years later.
Oh, it's so interesting. So when you first experienced it, I mean, you're 17 years old. What a time for your light language to be activated. Did you feel calmness? Did you feel security? Did you feel safety when all of that happened? Or was it a bit overwhelming?
No, I was absolutely over the moon. I remember that night when my first light language activated. I was elated. I was so happy. I couldn't sleep. I was sharing, I think, like a I don't know, what would you call it, like a camping cabin, because it was like a forest setting with two of my friends at the time, and I'm like, I need to get out of bed. I'm gonna speak this language, and it was actually a light language, and I was just literally absolutely over the moon and thrilled. I never had any fear. A lot of people do have fear. It comes from the place of not having understanding of what you're saying, and it's feeling like it's a foreign language. What am I saying? Am I cursing someone? Am I possessed? It's not like that. You always have conscious control to a point where you can stop it and start it. What you may not have is you may not have understanding of what you're saying. For me, it took me literally 10 years of looking for answers outside of the confines of that cultural and religious context to actually realize that, yes, you can understand it. It's energy channeled in the form of sound to be.
It's so interesting. And so you fully accepted that. You didn't fight it.
Absolutely not. I didn't fight it, but then also I didn't lean in. I kind of followed my normal conditioning. I went to university, I studied sociology, studied law, I went into the path of entrepreneurship, I run a business, and basically I got married. I did all these normal standard things that are expected in our society. And it only came to a point where my business was extremely stressful. And I was trying to remedy this constant stress, this feeling of unhappiness felt like a weight on my shoulders. So what did I start to do? I started meditating just to calm my mind down. And I think that was the little trigger that showed or sent a sign to the universe and to my actual guide. And that's when it all started.
Cool. Let's back up a little bit just for the listeners and viewers who don't know, but everybody's pretty way out there in our audience. But why don't you explain what light language is and really what its healing and activations codes really mean or what they're intended for?
Super, super useful question. And I think it's very good to put things straight, because light language feels like this mystical modality that nobody understands what it's there for and what's the purpose of it. My own definition that I coined is simply channeling energy in the form of sound. So I think that the name light language, or even gift of tongues, whatever kind of you call it, isn't very fortunate, because it likens it to a human language. And we need to understand it's not a linguistic phenomenon, it's an energetic phenomenon. When we think about light language in linguistic terms, and I'm actually a polyglot, I speak multiple human languages, which I learned, they didn't activate, I did the old-fashioned way, obviously. it's not nothing like it. Yes, light language can carry information, but mostly it carries frequency and energy. But it does sound like human language, or at least some light languages resemble human languages. Some others don't. Some others sound like very, let's say, wacky to human ears. And it's important to simply listen with your heart and with your whole body, other spiritual senses, rather than with your physical ears.
It's interesting. It's almost sort of a code. I mean, it is a code. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, codes again is that another kind of word that is being used quite a lot. It's light codes, and I think there's a slight difference between these two. So yeah, light language. I think of light language as a medium of kind of energy transfers. Is an externalized form of energy transfer, not different to, let's say, Reiki, which most people understand, or any other form of like healing frequency. However, light codes are something different. I actually use a different term for it. I call it consciousness technology because it's like immaterial. Yeah, that's also the actuarians call it. It's consciousness technology. I know it's a mouthful, but when we talk about light codes, some people think like light refractions or reflections, but it's not that. It's basically frequency, energetic upgrades that can start working inside our energy fields to fine tune it. It's a little bit like consciousness technology or light codes is a little bit like having an upgrade to your software or having your car fine tuned. Only we're not talking cars or computers, we're talking energy fields. So that's basically what it is. And light language can become a carrier, a medium for transferring light codes.
So when the Arcturians came to you 10 years after this activation, how did they approach you? Was this through a meditation? Was this very direct to you? How did this all work?
I was running two businesses, one online, one offline. I lived in Australia. I just moved to Australia at that time.
Cool.
And I was still running an online business in my native Poland, which meant a big time difference. And I remember running like a webinar, which ended at like 2 a.m. my time in Australia. It was like a daytime probably in Poland or something like that. And I remember being wired and not being able to sleep. So what I did is I started meditating, but it was the time like 2 or 3 a.m. where my conscious mind control, I think, wasn't as, let's say, strong as it is when you're meditating at daytime. It was the middle of the night. And all of a sudden in this meditation, I had this transcendental experience. I was taken into what I believe now to be like fourth dimension, which is where present, future, and past all run parallel. And I met this beautiful female being, which didn't say I'm Arcturian. She said, my name is Celeste, which I knew in this vision that it wasn't her name. It was just something for my ears to understand. And she said, I come from a cold planet. And her skin was bluish, very similar actually to what I'm wearing today. Light bluish, fair complexion, fair hair, very kind of like a Scandinavian look, very dainty. And we had a conversation in this kind of almost like a house that I created with my consciousness, which was my like little space in the quantum field. And we had this conversation, and she almost like conveyed this meaning of it's about time, like that's the time. And then she said, follow the grid, follow the blue light, and here is a book about sacred geometry that you need. I'm like, okay, what is the grid? What is the blue light? I didn't understand any of it. But one thing I did understand was the book about sacred geometry, because the exact same book that I saw in this space, in this vision, I found on Amazon.
No
only
way.
Thing, yeah. The only thing
That's
is,
so cool.
And I think it was like a perfect orchestration, because this book was so difficult for me to read and digest. There was all mathematic formulas and musical formulas. I was like, goodness me, what is this all about? And I went then the lazy way, and instead of reading it, I said, okay, there has to be an easy way to understand. I went to Gaia, I put sacred geometry, and that's when Matthias De Stefano series Initiation, I think, came up. And then started to talk about Arcturians, and then all my memories started coming. And at that same time, Australia was under lockdown. We couldn't get out. I didn't know what the grid is, but somehow I figured the energetic grid of the Earth. So I'm thinking, hey, where can we go in Australia? Okay, there is an energetically charged space, very famous. Let's go to Uluru. And that's when me and my husband went there. And that's when he reconnected with the Arcturian Council of Elders. His memories were coming back. And blue light is simply just Arcturian energy, because that's how it appears to human eyes, as a blue aura. And then everything started making sense after that, because all our kind of memories came back. But it was like a perfect orchestration to put us in the right place.
I'm going to mispronounce this. Uluru. See, I will say Uluru because I'm American. I know that's wrong. Is that a Stargate portal?
I believe so. I'm not sure, obviously, how there's different traditions. Obviously, it's an important place, both Uluru and another sacred site, which is called Kata Juta. It's a sacred Aboriginal site, and I believe there is definitely a special energy there. To me, it feels like a library of knowledge. Being my actual experience there wasn't to do with extraterrestrials. My experience there was an encounter with the energy of Mother Earth.
Okay, so what'd she tell you?
She basically presented herself to me as mother of all creatures, or mother of all things. And I think I came to peace that I was always pursuing spirituality and supernatural consciousness abilities, third eye opening and visions and stuff like that, somewhere out there in the higher realms. Perhaps because I was always surrounded by powerful psychics, including my husband, including other friends, and they were always very much out there. Mother Earth showed me that it's actually my strength is in this divine feminine and grounded experience, that what I've been looking for somewhere out there has always been here. My care for animals, my care for plants, how I'm kind of wired with my actual earth lineage, with my grandmother, great grandmother. It's always been about earth, about caring for this kind of all the living creatures. And she showed me that basically sometimes we pursue these experiences like, transcendental, but there's also beauty and power in those little things where you care for a bird, where you care for a plant, where you kind of adopt a dog or something along these lines. So that was a very, very nice experience to show me my place here on Earth. And I think the reason I'm sharing it here with you, thank you for asking, is that very often one of the biggest struggles for awakening starseeds, or even more so for non-awakened starseeds who are still unaware of all of that, is that they can't find their place here on planet Earth. And I think it's super important to ground, to kind of connect through the root chakra to Mother Earth, just so that they feel like they welcome here, that this is their home for this lifetime. They don't need to look for a home somewhere in the stars.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. And I would say we've had this come across a podcast before where we're sort of earth workers in a way. And that's just so interesting, because as starseeds, we feel uncomfortable. We feel like, where is home? Because I know I personally am always looking, well, where is home? But this has certainly come through on the podcast that we're here that some of us are here to take care of the living beings on Earth, and Earth has a role in the overall universe. Oh, congratulations. I mean, that's so exciting. And I understand that. I mean, a lot of us look for that which is outside of us, because it feels so strange to be in these bodies sometimes and to sort of watch what's happening. I mean, it's a crazy world.
That's normal. We're not meant to belong, you see. We are not meant to belong here. We're meant to actually challenge the status quo. And of course, things will bother us here on this planet because of our memories of a different level of consciousness, of a different space and time where there is unconditional love, where, is not in shortage. There is no judgment. And all the things that here are in a bit of a short supply. So to a degree, it's normal. And I think that feeling of wrongness will never go away, and let it not go away, because once we have accepted the status quo, which isn't the greatest on this planet, like I sometimes, I don't even understand. I do feel like a total alien, especially when looking at all the damage that is done to people, to the planet, wars. I was like, how come we still not evolved enough to be resolving our conflicts in a peaceful way? Like this, that will never, ever, ever go away, this feeling of wrongness. But I think what can change, what can help, is when we do our inner work, at least it doesn't have to be so hard. It doesn't have to be so uncomfortable. And we didn't come here to suffer. That's the message I always say. We didn't come here to suffer. When we use the tools that we have available because of the Starseed lineage, because of that connection, then our life can be pretty groovy here on Earth. It doesn't have to be difficult for us personally.
So I know that's something you've spoken about in some of your posts about our mission, or that the feeling among many starseeds, and I speak for myself, but I think I could probably pretty well vouch for other starseeds, that you feel as though this is that we have to suffer, that because we don't feel like we belong here. Well, gee, my whole life has to be about suffering then. And that may be true for others as well that have certain intuitive or neurodivergent sort of leanings, that there's this core sense that we must suffer.
That is an old religious imprint, basically. And that comes from this whole idea that a mission has to be something uncomfortable. And it doesn't. I feel like actually when you are walking the path you meant to walk, you've got another beautiful flowery word for it in the spiritual community called alignment.
Right, I know.
Embodiment and alignment. But what is it? It's a path of happiness. It's the path of going in with the flow of that river rather than against the flow. And I feel a river is actually a very good metaphor for Starseed mission, because sometimes when we talk about Starseed mission, soul contract, we think of some kind of legal document with do's and don'ts, and if you don't do that, you'll be
I agree.
incurring penalties, and it will.
I'm stuck here again if I don't do it right.
Yes, yeah. And I see it as a riverbed. It literally is. You can be going somewhere on the outskirts, on the shore, through the bushes, and it can be difficult. But alignment is when you are in this sweet spot, in this flow, and things do start moving easier. And it's not actually our starseed lineage that is in the way of us feeling happy and fulfilled. Absolutely not. It's something totally different. Is the earth lineage, is the human conditioning that makes it difficult, is our ancestry, the patterns we inherit from our parents, grandparents, is the trauma that we go through in our childhood, is the societal conditioning that is not wired for us being happy, balanced, abundant, but it's more about us being slaves to the system and just basically being unhealthy, unhappy, and stressed. It's actually not the starseed connection that makes us uncomfortable. It's all the weight of the 3D programming and conditioning that thankfully is absolutely rewirable, and it's absolutely healable. And once we do this kind of work, I call it advanced shadow work, because it's not just our own stuff. It's not just things that hurt us in childhood or adulthood. I know a lot of people will do the inner child work, but sometimes inner adult has been through a lot of trauma too, sometimes more than
Absolutely.
the child. And sometimes it's not just us, sometimes it's also our ancestors, sometimes it's things to do with our cultures. When we get rid of all this energetic mess, that's when the life becomes way, way easier. And that's when Starseeds mission isn't the burden. It's actually an expression of our passion. And having worked with so many Starseeds, I know that usually what comes to us very easily and naturally here in this lifetime is exactly what we came here to do, because this is something that we have done in our previous lifetimes. I remember this lady a couple of years ago, and my husband was giving actually a starseed reading to people in our membership. We had a small group back then. Now the group is a little bit bigger, so we don't do personal life
Mhm.
starseed readings because it would take a whole day. But I remember having a small group, and this lady turned up to be someone who was chartering star maps on a Syrian starship. And then she said, okay, so what do you do now? Oh, well, I'm working in logistics, and I absolutely love it. I love organizing the routes and stuff like that. So,
Huh.
when we think about Starseed mission, we think that it's going to be something very consciousness, very spiritual, but it could be something that you were chartering routes on a starship, and now you're doing the same thing right here on Earth because that's your natural gift.
Oh, that's so interesting. How cool. So it says part of your work is to connect us full circle from our starseed origins, which may also be our future. That's another discussion. Our past is our future is our present, but that it connects us not only to our present, but to our ancestral past in order to clear that.
Absolutely. That is the core of my work is clearing patterns. I see reality as patterns, energetic patterns.
Oh, uh-huh.
And those energetic patterns are those repeating stories, the limitations that we come across. And ancestral work is a huge, huge part of my work, because that's where majority of pain and trauma comes from. Apart from this lifetime, is actually the generations that have gone, the human ancestors that have gone before us. Once you kind of identify those energetic patterns that are cluttering our field, things get easy. And also, you have a much more capable energy field to receive all the upgrades, all the light codes. Because when you feel this full of pain, trauma, conditioning, and all of those negative limitations, there isn't much space there for the
Mm.
new, for the higher frequency.
Oh, good point. I understand that completely now. I think I understand it better now. That's so because we talk a lot about ancestral trauma on the podcast and trying to understand it. I personally was just thinking about my own ancestral trauma, and I kept seeing it from the men in my family. That has been something I was trying to figure out, frankly. But then it finally dawned on me. I'm like, but wait a minute, what's happened to all the women? As you recently posted about your grandmother, and you made a comparison using your current sort of state, your lovely current state, and then where she was at the same age, all the things she had been through at that time, and how that tends to end up in your ancestral energetic field, which I'd not heard that term before. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Is that part? Because I thought, how do you clear the lineage from, I don't know, the 18th
With
century?
pleasure.
Right.
With pleasure. I absolutely love talking about this, and it's basically the biggest thing when it comes to patterns is to spot them, is
Mm-hmm.
to see those regularities, those repeated stories, and sometimes they're very obvious. For example, if every time you look back at your parents, grandparents, maybe there is a history of substance abuse, or maybe your all women in your family are always being abandoned by men, or maybe there is a pattern that in my family there was a pattern that men die very young in tragic circumstances. So first of all, see those patterns, and sometimes they repeat themselves in a very straight way, so the same history repeats itself, and it's quite easy then to spot the pattern and then clear it. However, very often those patterns transmute. The themes are the same, but the meanings are different. Usually when I work with entrepreneurs, I can see this. Like, let's say there's a pattern of them being invisible. Let's say you want to go out there, you want to get clients, you want to be seen, you want to be noticed. Nothing. Just literally no views, no engagement on your social media. There is that. And then maybe that pattern links to, let's say, the fact that for your ancestors, being invisible was a survival strategy. Maybe they were some persecuted minority that had to hide. Maybe they were escaping from some oppressive regime and they had to hide. Maybe there is a history of, let's say, sexual abuse where hiding and being as small as possible was actually a strategy for survival. So this is how these ancestral patterns work. Once you spot them, that's literally 90% of the work. Once you spot them, you have to release them, or you can release them. You don't have to, but you can release them. And basically you do it in a way that honors the ancestors. So never break an ancestral pattern. If you break a pattern, the field tries to get your attention back. And sometimes there will be a lot of upheaval. It's very upsetting because, let's say, that pattern of visibility, you go out there and you try to do something, and it's like field screams danger, go back to your spot, don't put yourself out there, because it can result in a tragedy. So what you need to do instead is you need to actually talk to your energy field and talk to your ancestors as well. So in your imagination, in your mind's eye, you recognize what they've been through. So you literally put yourself in their shoes. You kind of sympathize with them. You kind of think, oh my God, that's what they've been through. What would it feel like to have to hide? Or what would it feel like to have your heart broken? So that's one thing, is that acknowledgement. And you do it very similar, like as if you were doing in a child healing, where you imagine maybe your grandmother, maybe your mother, maybe your father, as a small child or as an adult or adolescent, whatever time they were going through hardship, and you send that version of your ancestors from the past everything they didn't have, everything they needed. And then you separate yourself from the pattern. You basically state to the field, and I usually recommend doing it out loud. You say, okay, I can see there is a pattern of invisibility in my field. I acknowledge where this pattern comes from. It comes from whatever ancestral story was there. Let's say the fact that my ancestors were hiding during the war. But today, this pattern doesn't serve me. And as a sovereign, energetic being, I declare I'm going my own way. I'm separating myself from this pattern, and I'm embracing a pattern of being visible, being vibrant. This is what serves me. And you state the new reality, and as if by magic, reality starts to shift. That's very, very powerful work.
Super interesting about all of that. I think there's a lot of confusion about it. And epigenetically also, it's shown through science that obviously it gets the trauma or the experience, whether it's poverty or famine or war, it's transcends not only our fields, but it becomes part of our DNA. So by resolving the field, we clear our DNA as well. Is that about right?
Yes, of course, there is the biological expression of the DNA, and that's what epigenetics is all about. But energetically, it isn't 100%. The principles are the same, but they're not 100% identical, because the same ancestral work can be done by, let's say, someone who's been adopted. And it's not going to have to be done on actual biological family, because upon the act of adoption, which is like energetic contract, they're being plugged into the adoptive family.
Right.
Things happen upon marriage, for example. You are plugged into your husband's or wife's energy and lineage as well. And sometimes you can inherit patterns from your spouse's
spouse.
Sometimes, and I've experienced that, you can even take on energetic patterns from a business partner that you work with, because you create like an energetic contract. And of course, you're not going to probably take their patterns of relationship, but when it comes to abundance and money and, business, I've seen that, and I've experienced that, where people almost like plug into each other's lines. So patterns are a little bit beyond just the physical DNA. That's why I refer to that ancestral energetic field, which is a field of information, which is not just our blood ties, but also beyond that.
So I'm curious, from your experience with sacred geometry and understanding the mathematics of things, and this goes beyond sort of, or maybe it is what our energetic field is. Is it this code? Is it this pattern? When we talk about patterns, it's not just a pattern of relationship or a pattern of action. Perhaps it's actually a pattern, a numeric sort of pattern that follows us along or transcends the auric fields. Is that going too far?
I think this is going pretty far, but I think you are actually onto something, because basically that's kind of the I'm not visual. I've never seen a numeric expression of it in this kind of context.
Right.
But what is light language? What is, it's all like some kind of sounds make patterns. And when we talk about how it works, it's basically an interaction between our own energy field and the greater quantum field. So when we take it back to the basics, what is our energy field? It's like this kind of like egg that sits around us, and this egg is full of this information, patterns, programs. And when you're talking about this kind of like numeric code, yes, sometimes it works like that. It works like an algorithm. So consciously, you may be like, for example, going by this visibility example, consciously you may be like, this is what I want. I want my business to be big. I want people to know me. I want clients to come. But what if the information encoded in the field is visibility equals danger? Then the field reacting with a further field will be bringing this outcome of, hi, this is how you save. This is how we survived in this kind of family or country or whatever. So yeah, I think like very interesting when you talk about the numeric code. Quite possibly there is something like that.
Yeah, a sort of fractal, because when I think about light language, like bringing this full circle, when I think about light language, and I don't know that all of our viewers and listeners know this, but when you do the light codes, they have a specific pattern in them when you write them. I'm sure you probably have written them, and you're much more experienced at this than me, but they have a specific sort of pattern. So I'm curious if that's sort of what transcends time and energy and DNA altogether.
I would imagine so. I'm more about the spoken light language,
right?
But obviously, I'm aware, and I've had clients and students who write light language.
Yeah.
And yes, of course, it follows patterns, but so does the sound. That's why people say sometimes, "Oh, yeah, this sounds repetitive." Well, this is the sound pattern. So yes, I'm sure that that's how it works. It's like this whole big, fabric of reality. And the good news is that once you learn a little bit more about how to work with this invisible reality, how to weave those patterns, how to reprogram the algorithm, outcomes change, lives change, and you can literally have a way better concrete stuff. It's not just kind of metaphysical knowledge, but it can translate to real kind of changes, be it in your love life, be it in your income, be it in your business, be it in overall happiness.
I know we're pushing the time limit here, but do you mind sharing just a little bit about your personal sort of breakthroughs regarding ancestral lineage? Because I find it really fascinating, and I have some friends who are Polish whose mothers and grandmothers went through an enormous amount of trauma. And I see, in a way, it carrying on even in a modern way. They may not be concerned with healing their ancestral trauma, but I can't help but recognize it.
Yeah, I think that there's always more than one, trauma pattern, and it doesn't matter what culture you come from. I work with clients from all over the world, and there's certain themes that repeat, and there's certain more specific to a particular culture. Obviously, war leaves its mark, but I find that sometimes it's more the relationship dynamics between ancestors that also leave the mark. I'll give you a few examples of patterns that I have released. Good thing is once you release them, you forget about them. It's almost like they don't affect you. But one of the very interesting patterns was a pattern that started with the great grandmother that I shared with on a recent short video. So basically, she had quite recognized in her community like healing abilities. We could call it these days doula, but what she was doing, she was delivering babies. She was preparing the people who deceased for burial. There was, back then there was no funeral homes.
That's true.
Hospitals weren't available, but she definitely had these kind of abilities. She was nursing sickly children or babies back to health. And then what happened is when, apart from all the trauma she suffered from during the war, but that actually happened before Second World War, she had a 3-month-old baby daughter that she lost in infancy illness. I can't remember what exactly it was, but baby fell sick and passed away. And what happened then, and this is something that me and my mom deciphered back, I think in 2020, we started having the same dreams. The ancestor field was like ready to release. We discovered the pattern. But let's go back to how the pattern displayed in current reality. The current reality is that my mom and I were always very scatterbrained. We would lose things. We would kind of not have our stuff together. It would feel like we don't have control over our reality. And it was especially concerning things that were important. Keys, bank cards, all these kind of, things that you need for your job or whatever. 2020, my mom and I are getting the same dreams. And it's the dreams about rushing somewhere, being at the airport, having suitcase, which is all scattering around, trying to hold it together, not being able to hold it together. We're like, what's going on? And at the same time, we start losing even more things. I've lost a microphone that I was using daily for my work. I lost some kind of bank cards. It's like, what the heck is going on? There is some pattern. We need to figure it out. And it stemmed all the way back to that great grandmother who lost a 3-month-old baby. Because bearing in mind very specifically that she was helping other babies, she was helping other people, she couldn't help and hold alive what was her own. So her losing that 3-month-old baby daughter felt like a personal failure, like I'm good for nothing. I'm not a good healer. I can't be trusted with what is important. Eventually, she developed that pattern of losing things. And she developed early onset dementia. Same happened to my grandmother, my mom's mom. She also developed dementia. And there was always this kind of pattern of losing keys, looking for where I put my wallet, all of the time, just having this kind of scatterbrain. Discovering this pattern helped me and my mom get diagnosed with ADHD, which we weren't sure. We were just like, we're just scatterbrained. Since we released this pattern, we recognized that ancestral trauma from that unfortunate early kind of, childhood death of the little baby girl. All the symptoms have stopped. My mom and I are managing reality. We're not losing stuff. I don't remember the last time we lost things. So and having the ADHD diagnosis helps us manage that. It's like, okay, that's actually not too bad. So this is like, this ancestral pattern, which actually ended up in a physical illness. I also believe that doing this work will probably stop us developing dementia later on.
Absolutely.
But there's obviously hundreds of other patterns that there are, and they not always have to be, traumatic grand events. Sometimes there's also relationship dynamic between the ancestors. Sometimes it's about maybe women never being appreciated in relationships or something like that. So lots of examples, but that's one interesting one.
I understand. That's very cool. Wild that you and your mom were having the same dream at the same time.
Yeah, that's what happens when, doing ancestral work is great to do on your own. But I have worked now with clients who are siblings, who are families. That almost intensifies. The ancestral field wants to release that pain and trauma. They didn't have therapy. They didn't have the tools we have today. So even though they pass away, that pain is there. And it's almost like it's ripe. It's like they're cheering us on. Go, deal with it, release it. You at least have a better life.
So interesting. So let's take this full circle to your light language and being a starseed. And does it feel like a reach to understand all of these connections? Like we're all very connected to our ancestors, to our starseeds, to our future selves. How does this all play for you? And how does this play for your clients to connect all these dots?
I think it starts with this kind of like a bit of an overwhelm always. It almost starts like, oh my goodness me, there's all these patterns. And there's all these different galactic star races. And it's like there's all these energies I can work with. It starts with all of that. We're a little bit like such a big, wild multiverse out there.
Yep.
But it always ends, or it should end, with a journey back to yourself. The journey back to sovereignty. That all these energies are there to support us, but after all, it's about us being not the passengers, but the drivers of this whole soul evolution. I think it starts complicated and simple, and it ends with this kind of like, what is my heart's true desire? What do I actually want to be? It's not. People start by asking the question, who am I? As in, what's my starseed origin? What's my purpose? What's my mission? And then slowly but surely, they go through these layers of conditioning. They release the ancestral pain and trauma. They release all the kind of conditioning from the culture and society and expectation and past life. And then they end with a question, well, it's not about who am I? It's like, who do I actually want to be? It's up to me. Who do I want to be? What do I want to do? So for me, it's always a journey to sovereignty, to self-love. And the foundation of the self-love is self-trust. Because when we think of self-love, we often think self-care, all of that. But I believe it's actually about self-trust, about trusting our decisions, trusting our abilities, trusting our intuition. That is actually what my work is.
That is so cool. It is very cool. How did you discern that this was it? I mean, girl, you're an entrepreneur, you're running a couple of businesses, you've lived all over the world. How did this sort of come together for you?
Life, I suppose. Life and there's a theme in those client sessions that I've had and group sessions. It's basically that's what it is. Like the more layers we deprogram, the more we let go of all these other people's expectations, these traumatic past events, the more people's inner light has a chance to shine through. And I always see this brilliance, this charisma, whether it's in entrepreneurship, whether it's just in life, where people are coming back to their essence, coming back to actually what they want to be. And I've seen sometimes it's a messy process. Let me just say that.
Oh yeah.
It can be. Things fall away from your life. People realize that maybe a relationship that they were in actually isn't in the highest good. Sometimes they realize that the career they were pursuing is completely like barking the wrong tree. And it can get messy, but the reward at the end is like this kind of sense of peace. And it's like, okay, I'm exactly where I want to be, and I'm exactly who I want to be.
But I'm curious what both you and the Arcturians and other starseed families feel like. Why is it so important for us to be waking up at this time, to be finding our true essence, which I hope people realize is part of the awakening process? It's not just all this ooga booga weird woo-woo stuff, but it's really, as you stated, that it is to realize our sovereignty as the true essence of ourselves.
I think it's an opportunity to actually stop this cycle of perpetuating trauma on this planet. And this is a part of this higher consciousness, because we can be doing all the cool stuff, crystals and light language and retreats and plant medicine, but until we actually deal with the core of what is holding us back, what is bringing us down to earth, whether it's an argument with a mother-in-law or a bill that's haunting us or whatever, then we can't really focus on this consciousness development and this kind of like collective ascension, let's say, because there's always these little things that will be dragging us down. So this is why I think it's super important to put our energetic house in order, because you see people talk about raising your vibration all the time. You hear it in the spiritual community, raise your vibe. And I don't believe in raising your vibration, don't get me wrong. But what I believe is even more important is to stabilize certain level of frequency. So we're not like a yo-yo where, we've gone to a retreat and there's been an amazing experience and then reality hits and it's just back down and it's just like a yo-yo. No, it's about actually us embodying a certain level of consciousness, which also translates to happiness. And I think that is a part of how it can be. Those starseed memories, those little glimpses of what life is like in, with the Lyrians or the Arcturians or the Syrians, it's almost like a reminder of how good it can be here for us on Earth. Objectively, this planet is the most beautiful planet. I think maybe Lyran planets are quite similar. But like when I'm looking at how amazing Earth is as a planet, there's nothing wrong with Earth. We want new Earth. We want Earth to change. Actually, it's not about new Earth. It's about humanity 2.0. It's about the inhabitants. That's what needs to change. Nothing wrong with this planet as such. So I think we have such an opportunity here. It's just question, where we're going to take it.
I love that, humanity 2.0. And that's a great point to make about New Earth. I think there's there's a feeling, or there's a misunderstanding, just going to push that envelope. There's a misunderstanding that the New Earth is going to arrive and it's going to be great. It's going to be paradise. We don't have to work for it. We don't have to do anything. I thought things were supposed to get easier. So I feel like that's a misconception. It perhaps will be easier. Do you have any thoughts about all of that?
Yeah, there's a conversation over dinner between us. No, genuinely, because we have a slightly different understanding of what, like, dimensions, 3D, 5D, etc. My personal understanding is that the really dimensions on New Earth, it's almost like it's an inner state of being, which then translates to outer state of beings if enough people adopt this level of consciousness. And I think that us actually doing our inner work, shedding all that pain and trauma, doing all the stuff we mentioned, that's how we embody, we live New Earth. So it doesn't matter that maybe globally things aren't looking great.
Right.
There's no denying that there's atrocities on this planet every single day. But it's almost like it stops being the part of my reality. My reality is peace. My reality is calm. My reality is flow. Things come well for me because I've done my inner work and I have dealt with the part that is concerning me. And if enough people do this kind of work, then the frequency changes. Like with this popcorn, there will be this critical mass. And I think what we also need to remember is time scale and time-wise. Again, it's not going to be some savior event that something will come from the outside. It comes from within. But also, please remember, and this is something that's been landing for me, as the guides have been nudging me about for the last few months, is that we need to remember the time scales. We think in terms of months. It's like, is it going to be this year or next year, whatever. We have a very short time span perspective. So things are changing. Look how much we have evolved as humanity. Look how, for example, we treated animals 200 years ago, 50 years ago, and how we treat animals today. There's a lot of positive changes. How human life was maybe not very valuable, I don't know, so many years ago, and now it is more and more valuable. So I think those changes can be very, very evolutionary rather than always revolutionary. And in the end, consciousness is rising. The level of awareness is rising. And again, I would urge anybody not to be looking so much globally. Start with putting your own energetic house in order. Because sometimes all this kind of big stuff and consciousness can be a form of escapism. It's easy to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to save the world. Well, save yourself.
Right. Save yourself first. It's like a pool. It's like a puddle. If I'm saving that rock in the middle, it all ebbs out. So if there's enough of us that do it, as you suggested, then the critical mass changes, the frequency of the planet changes, and new Earth, so to speak, is reborn from the inside out.
That's how I see it.
Cool. Do you want to close? Should we? Is there anything I'm missing about this? We sort of just let this flow. How can people get in touch with you? Tell me about upcoming workshops. You're in Costa Rica. How do we come visit you? All those, or do you do everything online now? How does it all work for you?
I actually do everything online. I know. I live in a place which calls retreats, but this is not the way I work.
Right.
I actually have this deep belief that I don't want these external one-off events. Everything I do is online because people can do it, first of all, wherever they are in their day-to-day. I'm a big fan of integration with day-to-day. It's not like, okay, I'm going to come here and feel amazing for a week and then go back to my reality.
Right.
I'm all about practical transformation. So you can find me on both TikTok and Instagram at Starseed, on my website realloveguard.com. I run a couple of very interesting online programs, which is, I suppose, something you guys may be interested in. So one thing that I do is, for 4 years now, we've run a membership called the Quantum Club, which is all about starseeds and spiritual development. There's weekly classes. There's a library of, I think, something like 200 sessions where you can dive into any kind of like subject, whether it's ancestral healing or light language or starseeds or Syrians or Arcturians. So that's one of the things that I do. And then once a year, and it's coming to this time of the year where we're enrolling, we run a 6-month program starting every January and running till June, which is called Transcending Dimensions. And this is like a full reprogram of your energy field, where we go through all these layers of conditioning, ancestral patterns, karmic patterns, collective patterns. Then we reconnect you with your star family. Then we kind of start working with the energy of abundance, the energy of money. It's like a full rebirth. It takes 6 months. It happens right in your home, in your reality. People have huge breakthroughs, very practical results. And we starting every January, but enrollment is around October, November. So if you go to my website, you'll find details about that. So that's the 2 avenues of work with me you can explore. One is more spiritual abilities development, and the other thing is more about the personal transformation.
Would you mention your website, the name of it again?
Yeah, realloveguard.com. So my name, surname.com.
Cool. Okay. So is there a message that the Arcturians or any Starseed family would like to come through on this particular podcast right now? Maybe not.
I feel like, no, I'm just tuning in at the moment, and I feel like it's going to be Arcturians. May I do a light language transmission and translate what comes through?
Of course.
Okay, so there will be it will be a message in Arcturian light language, which I'll translate as soon as the message comes through. So first, if you can just open your heart to the Arcturian light language, which sounds a bit like Arabic, but it's not. Just listen with your heart. and then I am going to translate what comes through, because I don't know what they're gonna actually convey in this message. This message is a reminder to tune into your inner senses. What I've been shown throughout as I was transmitting is to trust your own intuition above all. It's like this big reminder. What I've been shown, and perhaps you have felt it, is almost like the opening of your eyes, of your ears, but the spiritual stuff, so you can see through whatever is being presented to you as a narrative and find your own truth. It was also a message of comfort, of like leaning into this self-trust and self-intuition, and also a connection to this planet. Perhaps some of you may have felt energy through your feet. It's also about actually grounding to this planet Earth and trusting that this planet has everything you need in this time to feel comfortable in your resources, in your life. That's it.
That's beautiful. I certainly felt that. I think that's, I really appreciate that very much. I feel that in my heart, and I certainly hope people receive it. I sure hope it's received. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for this, and I'm sure our listeners and our audience will be grateful too.
You're most welcome. Stay blessed. Thank you so much.
Word for our sponsors, Oweli Supplements and CBD Pure, both whom have generously offered to give you 15% off using the SoulFam podcast coupon code SoulFam, SOULFAM, and free shipping. And trust me, when you're ordering stuff like this, it actually really adds up. You can save quite a bit of money, several dollars for every order. Both Lexi and I have worked with these products and their companies, and we have firsthand experience, and we really like these companies, sincerely. Oweli, OWELI.com, is a supplement company that uses natural ingredients based on ancient knowledge coupled with modern science, which sounds a lot like the SoulFam podcast. I am a huge supplement person. I take multiple supplements each day. The quality of Oweli supplements is high and effective, in my opinion. I take Move for joint health because I work out almost every day. I do yoga, I walk, I hike, I ride horses. And secondly, I mix collagen, peptides, hydrolyzed protein for a protein shake every day, so I can be sure to get the right amount of protein in my body every day. And for women, I personally feel that's super important. CBD Pure, www.cbdpure.com, is made with non-GMO hemp grown without herbicides, pesticides, and other dangerous chemicals. Both Lexi and I feel like this is a stellar product. I use the CBD Pure 500 cream for pain in my neck from texting and working at a computer and a car accident I was in. Lexi uses CBD Pure Pet Health to help some of her posse of rescued cats who show up at her doorstep. They often have joint issues and other movement issues, and this product really seems to help Lexi's cats. Both products work superbly. No harmful side effects, at least from our experience. So once again, we thank our sponsors, CBD Pure and Oweli Supplements. We'll post links to both product lines on our Instagrams on my link tree and on YouTube and on our upcoming website, Patreon. Just remember the code for 15% off with free shipping, which once again adds up to a lot, is SoulFam, SOULFAM. That's SoulFam for our SoulFam.